Do you like my virtual background?
Yeah, man, I'm jealous.
It's more 3D than I expected, but I guess my computer update really made it very lifelike, we could say.
Probably the best one I've seen. So
What is that flag waving in the background? I think this is a willow tree, I
looks
think.
like it. Yep.
And yeah, I mean, you got a lake, so yeah, it works out. It's comfortable, but really, I'm just sitting in my kitchen with the new green screen. So
This is The Cross Section with Nate Lull and David Edelstein.
this was actually a very busy week as far as everything. You know, July 6th was kind of that day that we were waiting for this whole time. And July 6th was Monday for all sports to come back in some form. And I actually was at a live baseball game, and it was weird.
That was so cool to see. You know, I was watching you live on Twitter and just everything you were talking about. It was just neat to see someone actually out of the game covering it. I thought that was awesome.
I was talking to one of the coaches there, and the league I was at the Ludus Field in Rome, where the typical American Legion teams kind of formed their independent league this year because Legion had canceled. So this was what typically is Smith Post or Oriskany Post. They just calling themselves Smith and Oriskany. And they were playing. They played a doubleheader. And I spoke to the Oriskany coach, and he goes, "This is weird, isn't it?" And I was like, "Yeah, I almost don't know how to act. Like, I'm actually at a game. Like, I feel like I should be doing something else. How am I possibly just watching a game and covering the highlights and
Yeah.
everything that's going on?" But it was real, and it was happening.
Yeah, I know there was a couple of games down this way this week. I know Jason Miller, who we had on a couple of weeks ago, one of his teams played, and he said it was just a great thing to get back out there. A lot of rusty baseball, I think he said, but
Yeah.
it was great to just see the guys back out there enjoying it. And that was down in Norwich. So
Yeah. One of the interesting things was we've been talking so much about what it would take to come back. And so baseball and softball are moderate risk sports. So they were able to come back and organize leagues. And the only thing they couldn't do was obviously have more than 25 people or travel beyond the region for travel leagues. And so these were not travel leagues. Of course, Jason and the little leagues. And here it was high school baseball. I know that also there was the Empire Collegiate League college ball played at the Lewis Field on Wednesdays. And also on Monday, there was a softball league in Ilion. The Wayland Park Fast Pitch Summer Softball League started for high school softball.
mm-hmm.
So to just see them back out was great. And it was a lot of the messaging I heard was, yeah, we got to be safe. We got to follow the guidelines and make the best of what we can with all the guidelines we've been given. But they were ready to get back out there and give some of the students the opportunity to play again.
I know the softball league that's kind of down in my neck of the woods is going to start this upcoming week. And I'm not going to lie, I'm excited to go watch the game, but like you, I almost feel like I don't know how to act.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see what it looks like.
Well, we spoke a lot about the guidelines, and you and I last week had spoken about, what am I going to do to cover the game? So what wound up happening when I arrived there was I had all the guidelines in my head, right? So fans will be spread out by 6 feet if they don't live together or more. Players will be wearing masks in the dugouts. They have to social distance, no gum chewing, no seed chewing, umpires behind the mound to call balls and strikes, sanitizing bats, hour 45-minute limit on games to make sure that people aren't around each other for too long, and also only playing 6 innings, whichever comes first. And getting there was interesting. So I of course had my mask and everything. I got more than 6 feet away from everyone. So I was in like first base line down the field. No one was anywhere near me when I was doing my live stuff on TV. So I was not wearing a mask because I was far enough away. What was interesting to me was there were high fives being given. There were the players were much closer than 6 feet to each other. The only mask I saw on the field besides the 2 umpires wearing the masks at all times was one of the players had a mask draped around his neck. So there was eating going on in the dugout between the doubleheaders. So a lot of these rules suddenly, it's not I'm not trying to call them out, but to see how it is my job to show how things realistically play out after we've talked about it hypothetically for so long. And so after you and I spoke about it hypothetically, I was kind of really aware of what was happening. And it seemed that some of the guidelines weren't being followed as strictly as everyone had said, even though they were saying they have no problem shutting down the leagues if people aren't following the guidelines. So it was just an interesting juxtaposition of what everyone said was going to happen and some of what actually did play out. But I did think it appeared to me that everything was being safe. Each team brought their own baseballs. But it was just a different kind of reality compared to the predictions that we were making.
You wonder if you're just so excited to get back out there that all of a sudden you don't think about something and you kind of just do it because it's old habit. Like, hey, I got a quick break. I'm going to grab a snack in between innings or something to get fueled back up. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I forgot. I'm not supposed to do that. I wonder if it's just like that. You're so excited to be back out on the field that you suddenly forget about all these little rules that we're supposed to be following now. It's got to be tough.
Yeah, to just get back into it. And the league organizer, one of the coaches, did email me after he saw my report saying, hey, great report. I spoke with the coaches about making sure that we do the guidelines and everything. And I explained to him too, like, I'm not trying to call anyone out. My job is to tell people the reality of how things do actually play out in real life. And so, but what's great about these leagues coming back, and of course everyone wants to be safe. No one's like, on top of each other. What's great about the leagues being back is that some of the high school seniors are now getting a chance to play one more time if their team allows them to. It's a team-by-team decision, I was told, for all the leagues. But some of these seniors that I've been talking with for months now about how awful it's been for them to just lose their season, they've now been able to get back out there, even if it's just a pickup league. But they're just out there with their friends playing. And for some of them, it might be their last time playing in an organized league again.
Yeah, that's great that some of those seniors will get that chance, because I know down here in the softball league that I'll be going to, they aren't necessarily letting seniors play. I think they were going to try to have a senior game, and surprisingly enough, they didn't get a lot of signups for that. But I think in terms of the actual league, now that we're into July, they're just using like who would be coming back for next year's team. So, but any opportunity that any of the current seniors, class of 2020, get, I think it's great that they'll have an opportunity to go play, because now, say they were going to go into college and try to play. I mean, we had some other news this week that we don't know if they're going to get to play at the college level anytime soon either.
Yeah, I've been following the stories of all the college leagues, and one of the ones that started deteriorating about 2 weeks ago was the NESCAC, and Hamilton College is in the NESCAC. And about 3 weeks ago in June, I spoke with the head football coach at Hamilton College, Dave Murray, and he said he was confident that there would be some kind of football. He's like, we could figure it out. The only big issue was the guidelines from the NCAA, because he said they were paying more attention to Division I than they were really D2 and D3. And so the guidelines just they'd be delayed because of the guidelines, but they'd play. And then I spoke with him early this week after Bowdoin College canceled. They're the first ones. And that's the first game on Hamilton College football schedule. And also they were going to play at home for both men's and women's soccer at Hamilton. Then Wesleyan College and Williams College and Amherst College and Trinity College. And then you have half the league is not playing this year. So are you forced into a hole? I mean, Hamilton College didn't make a move. But on Wednesday, I spoke with Dave Murray again, and I said, so just want to check in, like, half the NESCAC's gone. What do you do? And he, all of a sudden, I mean, a huge 180 in tone. He said, his quote was, if you're a betting man, you wouldn't be putting much money on us playing football this fall.
Wow.
And I just thought that was a pretty shocking 180.
Yeah, what a difference in just a couple of weeks. And I know, at least on the high school level, some of my guests this week, coaches and athletic directors on my podcast, we talked a lot about different scenarios like that. And, there wasn't a lot of warm feelings about it, unfortunately. And it almost sounded like some athletic directors were like, okay, even if it's not in our league, we might just end up playing teams that are geographically close to us just to try to get something in.
Yeah, and that's the thing with the NESCAC. So the NESCAC and Hamilton College both made announcements on Friday saying that they were not going to have fall sports. The NESCAC announcement came first, and it appeared to leave open the opportunity for non-conference play because it said that the conference fall sports would be canceled. And then about 10 minutes later, Hamilton College came out with their own statement saying Hamilton College has decided that it will not participate in fall sports this year. So it canceled everything. And I spoke with athletic director John Hind about that. And I said, well, what's the deal with both happening at once? Who made the decision? Did Hamilton College follow? Did NESCAC just say what's going to happen? Did Hamilton make its own independent decision? And AD John Hind told me both were independent decisions. He said from the league standpoint, half the league wasn't going to play. So this was going to require a lot of changing and what was going to happen. And also for those that were playing, the NESCAC's all over the country. Like you were just saying, they're not geographically close. Hamilton College is the only NESCAC school in the state of New York. So Hamilton hadn't made a move because it's been pretty, according to what they're saying, they've judged that our area is better than other ones as far as how this coronavirus situation is playing out. There are less cases, so they didn't make a move. But Hamilton College said even though the NESCAC canceled because their league was just falling apart, which was also the quote from Dave Murray, that it was going to fall apart this fall. Hamilton College came out with their own independent decision, said John Hind, that it was looking at the situation. They didn't want to put anyone in positions to have to travel and play and everything. But something like Utica College in the Empire 8 conference, they, Blaise Fagiano, the head coach of the football team there, and I've also spoken with the soccer coaches, they're saying that they'll try and figure out ways to play locally. If they're, for example, their first week is at Western New England. But if Western New England can't happen, Blaise Fagiano told me he has already got teams in New York nearby ready to play. And he said the good thing about having the Empire 8 and why they're still optimistic that they're going to play is because they're geographically close. You're not, for the conference, you're not traveling outside of New York. They're all in New York.
Right.
And then he said you also have the Liberty League. Like Ithaca College was the example he used, a former Empire 8 team that he's already been in contact with saying, hey, if week 9, which is our bye, if you wind up not playing and we lose a game, you want to play week 9, and they're ready to go with something like that because they're geographically close. So you're right. It makes a huge difference.
Yeah, it certainly could be interesting on the high school level. When I was talking with Oneonta athletic director Jerry Mackey this week, he goes, Oneonta's in the stack and our closest away game is 50 minutes to an hour. So they're kind of looking at it like, well, maybe we could just play a bunch of non-league games against some of the bigger, maybe the MAC schools like the Sydneys and the Delhis and the Walton or Cooperstown. And so I think it could bring up some unique matchups. We don't often get to see Oneonta, Cooperstown play each other, mix in some of those other schools. If it gets to that point and they have to be creative, it could be some fun games to cover, I think.
Yeah, and we also spoke a bunch on the cross-section about how sectional standings are determined and seeding with the different Class C and D schools and getting points and all that. Of course, the state championships is the lowest priority according to the NYSPHSAA Executive Director Rob Zayas. Sectionals is the second lowest priority. The biggest priority is getting some games again, like we're seeing now with the baseball leagues and softball leagues starting up. So thinking about that seeding, that could all change. But Ben Nelson, the executive director for Section 4 athletics, told me that the biggest thing that's going to have to happen on the section level going forward is finding ways for the leagues to work together. Exactly like you're saying, because if it's geographically dependent or if you have to think about extra transportation because now you need one person per seat on a bus, so you need 2 or 3 extra buses, that's a cost. How do you reduce costs? By traveling less. So if he said if they could figure all that out, then they have leagues working together in an untraditional fashion.
Right.
But it's great to get the opportunity geographically close to actually have some kind of play because, again, even the league championships, which take place in Section 4 more than they do in Section 3, you don't even worry about those anymore. You're just scheduling games that are possible to play.
Yeah, I mean, because of all the leagues that I cover, the 3 main leagues are the MAC, the Tri-Valley, and the Delaware League, and they're so, mixed together. that you have teams in different leagues, and I'm sure it's the same up your way, that are 5 miles apart and never play each other because they're in different leagues. So now could be an opportunity where, maybe occasionally in the past they would do a non-league, but now I can see those teams playing 2, 3, 4 times maybe just to get games in. And wouldn't necessarily mean anything for standings or sectionals, but at this point, if you could get a game in and your neighbor 5 miles away wants to play, then why not? Let's go for it.
And that's one of the interesting things, too, that we still have to wait to see. One of the conversations I did have this week, along with Ben Nelson, was also John Rathman, the executive director for Section 3. We had him on as a guest a few weeks ago. And they were both, I was asking them about the sectional task force, because it was being recommended that, along with the COVID-19 task force for the state, that each section have their COVID-19 task force to consider how that's going to play out in your regions. And it will not only be interesting because of the leagues and just trying to schedule games, but again, at the moment, even though July 6th came around, which does not include high school organized sports, but when high school organized sports can start again, will the travel between regions be allowed? Because for me, I mean, Section 3, for example, is the largest section in New York State geographically,
Right.
Landmass area, according to John Rathman. And I mean, it's in like 3 different regions of New York: Mohawk Valley, Central New York, and you also got Lewis County up there. So when you think about it also in Section 4, you're kind of, I like to joke with you about how you're like right in that like triangle of Otsego, Delaware, and Chenango. So WCDO is like literally perfectly placed in the middle of those 3. But Otsego County is in the Mohawk Valley. And then you've got the 2 others in the lower tier, right? So southern tier. So is Oneonta allowed to play Norwich?
Right. We don't know. Yeah, that'll be interesting. And that's a huge rivalry. And again, that's probably the closest school for Oneonta to get to in their league. So again, when I spoke with Jerry Mackey this week, Oneonta athletic director, he goes, maybe we'll be playing Norwich 2-3 times, which from our perspective would be great, because it's always a fun time when those schools get together, because they've always been heated rivals. But yeah, I wonder about some of those boundaries, because you're crossing county lines and all sorts of things, and region lines. So be very interesting to see. I know they're trying to be as creative as they can be, though.
So I'm wondering whether Oneonta would play some Section 3 teams. Like if you just not only blend the league lines, but blend the section lines at that point, if geography becomes the biggest thing. Because obviously Cooperstown is in Section 3, which is nearby. So like you said, get them to play each other a little bit more maybe. But also, I know that Oneonta softball right now is playing in that Ilion League. So they're traveling up on Mondays to play in Ilion. Right now, Oneonta's Summer Softball League, and they're playing teams like Herkimer, Cooperstown, CVA. And so I wonder if those southern Herkimer County teams and the northern, all of Otsego County are able to, kind of make their own geographic region. Rather, if you can't, if it's not allowed to go across the New York split regions across the counties, because Herkimer and Otsego are together. So just do the same thing they're doing now with Oneonta literally playing north. And maybe those are some of the new matchups we see too.
I know that Oneonta also mentioned this week Cooperstown, other schools that are like along I-88 they could play, like Cobleskill, Richmondville, and dipping into that southern section of Section 2 possibly, along the I-88 corridor there, which would make for some easy travel. You'd have Dwaynesburg and some of those type of schools that maybe they could play along 88. But again, probably we'll have to go down to what they're allowed to do. And basically what Oneonta told me this week is, if there's a scenario that you've thought of, they promised me that they brought it up in their meetings. They are leaving no stone unturned for student athletes to try to get games going. So that was interesting to hear, because that was one thing that Coach Mackey brought up. He goes, I read all this stuff online, I listen to you guys, and everyone's got an idea. He goes, trust me, any crazy idea that's been thrown out there, we're looking at it, because maybe it'll work.
Good. I'm glad. So let's just keep throwing more random ideas at people and see what happens.
Yeah. Right.
And then when they choose one of our crazy ideas, we could take all the credit for it, maybe?
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Well, when you think about it, the beginning of the cross section, we were so into, and we had several conversations about switching fall and spring sports. And it's kind of humorous to see how now it has changed so that, I spoke with Matt Hazard again this week, and he goes, yeah, we were all about that. But now with the way things look, maybe that's not a good idea anymore, because then you would lose 2 straight baseball seasons that we've talked about.
Yeah, which has always been
not able to play. So it's like, boy, this thing is just constantly in motion and changing.
But not only that, but it went from being a non-conversation on actual practical COVID-19 task force levels, when I was bringing it up in these press conferences, like, hey, switching seasons, to actually not only are we considering that, but we're considering like 50 other scenarios you haven't talked about flipping seasons, such as flipping them but doing it later, or doing them in 2-week sessions or 8-week sessions or 15-week sessions, or flipping winter and spring and fall. It's like, wow, we didn't even talk about those. So it's kind of gone from a non-conversation, except for us just throwing it out there, to actually let's just consider all these scenarios just to be ready to go.
I had a coach on this week that's also an athletic director from South Courtray. So that's a small school in Delaware County. And he goes, for us, one of the concerns in our league is, okay, so say we try to play soccer in March and April. Okay, and then we try to play baseball in May and June. He goes, a lot of our fields physically overlap because we don't have a lot of room at our facilities. He goes, that's going to be really tough on our fields, our maintenance. Everything could be really chewed up. Normally it would have the fall and the spring and have the winter in between to kind of try to recover. So he goes, that was just another thing to throw into the mix of like, can our fields handle that much abuse? It would be really hard for some of the small schools to have that much use on their fields in one season. Yeah,
not only is scheduling an issue for a lot of, especially high schools, let alone colleges who have multiple fields, just making sure that, if you did combine them, or if you played the fall sports that are getting canceled now in the spring, like Dave Murray had said to me, we got soccer going on, and you got field hockey and this, and you've got baseball and softball. So how would you coordinate the field use? But you do bring up a good point that just came into my head of, sometimes I know the softball field's outfield could be like the football field. Like those are actually combined areas. Yeah. So it's actually not possible to have a football game and a softball game going on at the same time, for example. Right. So, I guess that's also, I wonder if that's going to be part of the reopening plan that schools are having to send into the governor's office by July 31st. So the timeline that Governor Cuomo proposed this week was this coming Monday, July 13th, that there will be guidance from the state education department. And then by the 31st, schools are required to send in a reopening plan proposal. And then between August 1st, which is the next day, I doubt it will be on August 1st. How do you consider all of that from the New York State in one day? But between the 1st and 7th, the first week in August, Governor Cuomo said that he expects to make a decision on schools and if how they will reopen. And obviously then the athletics side gets to say, okay, now we've considered our 6 and more situations about how schools will reopen. How does the athletics play into that? And I'm sure schools are considering in their plan athletics and where their field use would be and how that would even be possible. Yeah, just wild stuff. And it's interesting to see how it changes all the time. But, this weekend, especially speaking of things that have changed, today would have been Boilermaker Sunday. The Gus Maker basketball tournament in Norwich would have been yesterday, Saturday, and Sunday. And, I know I tweeted about it, at least for Gus Maker. And Boilermaker is also close to my heart. And, it's just a weird weekend. It's one of the first weekends for me where I really felt like I'm really one of the first weekends. There's been others, but where I'm really missing something. And so it's too bad. Yeah. I've been saying the whole time, since March, everyone was like, has it hit you yet? Has this hit you? It feels weird. I'm like, yeah, this is different. But I've been in go mode with just trying to make sure I cover everything and stay up to date and get the facts out and put it in context for people. So I said the whole time that I will probably start to notice and really feel the difference of what we're going through in the sports world and in life when we get to a time when there should have been an event happening and it's not. So, for example, I joked about that from college, right? Oh, I'll notice when I'm working professionally because when it gets to college break and I'm not on a break, right? That kind of thing. People usually say. But now it's like, okay, today is July 12th for us. So anyone watching, it might be after July 12th now, but today is July 12th, which would have been the original Boilermaker Sunday. And for the first time in its 40-plus year history, it's not happening at all, and it's not happening on its scheduled date. And, that's weird. That's just, for me, of course, it would have been my first time covering it. I showed up, like I said, I started right after the Boilermaker in 2019. But I can feel from the community that this is different to not have what's going on. And, of course, like I said, when I look out my window here in my kitchen, I can see that it's quiet outside, and hopefully people who were running were safe on the roads today.
Yeah, I hope everybody was safe. And I know a lot of people, a big thing with the Boilermaker seems to be people who have done every single one of them. There is a select group of people that can say that. And I'm sure it's weird for those people. Maybe they still went up and ran the course, but they don't want to lose that streak. So
yeah.
I'll be interested to see this week, as we talked about a little bit before we got started, like how many people actually showed up and said, hey, I'm going to try to run the course today.
And also, it's not over, because the story is going to continue going, because then you're going to get to September when people are going to run the virtual race, or they're just going to run it for fun again also from the 1st to the 13th. And then we'll have to see again how many people are running it and what happens there. So it's different to just feel how we're so used to, as sports people, something happening, action, right? That's what sports is about. And now it's been the action of when are guidelines going to come? Make predictions. Everyone put your bets on when the guidelines are going to come out. Are we going to be right? Oh, you were better. That's our excitement is hearing about things coming back. But it seems the NHL is getting closer. They yesterday Friday approved the CBA 4-year extension. And they came out, obviously Edmonton and Toronto are the decisions for the home hub cities. And 3 games a day at each is the plan. And the Players Association and the NHL approved phase 3, which is training camps, which can start as early as July 13th, Monday. And it's now approved for phase 4, the return to play, August 1st. So we might be seeing some hockey again soon as well.
Yeah, that would be great. It certainly seems like all the professional leagues are going through some big challenges right now, but it feels like hockey may have the best plan at the moment. It's also been interesting this past week or two to see, certain players that have said, no, like baseball players, I'm not going to come back, not going to take the chance. So that's been interesting, and see what else happens with that going forward.
Well, actually, just yesterday, Sven Berchi, a Utica Comets player this year, obviously in the Canucks organization, one of the 10 that the Canucks said would play with the NHL team in the playoffs. And he said he's not going to play. He made the hard decision. And listen, you have to respect anyone who makes a decision not to play, because these are just uncertain times.
Yeah.
You can follow the protocols. Some people have young kids. They have expecting new kids. There's families. There's their own personal health. And Sven, especially, Berchi, has been a guy all season long who's been working hard to get back to the NHL, asked for a trade midway through the season. There was tension between him and the organization because he wanted to be back in the NHL and didn't think he was getting the opportunity. And here's his opportunity. He's one of the 10. He's going to play in the playoffs with the Vancouver Canucks, and he has to take himself out of it, or he decides to take himself out of it. That's a very hard and mature decision to make. I mean, when you're considering all these factors, and it's tough to do. So now that's the first one for a New York-based team / Vancouver, the Comets in New York. But I haven't seen that in baseball yet. But it is a difficult decision. But it's interesting to see. You almost wonder whether, because of the way the season's played out, because of the break, because they're not going to have all their stars, or what if someone does get the coronavirus, people have been testing positive, or near people and they're quarantining for 2 weeks during the playoffs. Do you put an asterisk at the end of this Major League Baseball season or the NHL Stanley Cup after all this? You say, here were the standings when the season ended, and then here was the result of just our tournament that we had when we came back, basically for fun.
Yeah, it's definitely been interesting. I know, golf seems to have it kind of figured out. They've had a couple of guys on tour who did test positive, had to sit out. They came back. I thought it was interesting. They had 3 guys who had tested positive, got cleared, came back. They put those 3 guys together in their next round to play together. I don't know if that was just to make everyone else feel more comfortable or not, but golf is one thing that seems to be going along as best they can. But yeah, be interested to see what happens with NBA, Major League Baseball, and of course the NFL. The NFL had all this time, and time was on their side, and now it's not. Time is going fast, and maybe not on their side anymore. So, see what they do in the fall.
It's going to be interesting because we've been saying the whole time they were on their off season, so
right.
happening. But it's going to be interesting to watch. And I guess my biggest concern with any of the sports is that they'll start and then something will happen and they have to shut down again.
Yeah.
And then the second part of that, which I'm definitely keeping an eye on, is what happens to next year. Because we're going to be awarding the Stanley Cup in October.
Right.
So what plans? I mean, I know they're planning, but we're going to have to turn our attention soon to, this NHL season was supposed to start in October. So at this point, we always want to come back, but at this point it's like, okay, we've been trying. Maybe all of our planning should just go into having a beautiful full season of the NHL next year, rather than how the off seasons are going to work. You don't know. All the sports are playing at the same time, going to end at the same time. It is going to be weird. But for now, we're waiting the biggest thing I think is waiting that guidance from the State Education Department on Monday, on the 13th, to see what they say, and how that will affect high school athletics is kind of the next big move.